Looking back, I realize how much of our life together was built on assumptions of trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. Emily's growing distance and the allure of her gym routine had felt like a slow drift, but now, it was clear. We were on a collision course, and I was no longer willing to ignore the signs. Each new piece of evidence sharpened my resolve. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to shatter the facade they had built and make them face the truth. But first, I had to ensure there were no doubts, no avenues for her or Marcus to escape accountability. Emily's routine remained consistent, her devotion to the gym unwavering. To her, it must have seemed like I hadn't noticed the changes, or worse, that I was too naive to question them. I played along, pretending to be the same supportive husband I had always been. Meanwhile, I deepened my investigation. Using an app Mark, an old college friend and tech-savvy ally, suggested, I discreetly tracked Emily's location during her gym sessions. As I suspected, not all her time was spent at the fitness club. Late nights and extra sessions often ended at boutique restaurants or Marcus's downtown apartment complex. Through mutual friends at the gym, I learned Marcus had a reputation for blurring boundaries with his clients. It wasn't official gossip, more like knowing glances and hushed remarks. He was charming, sure, but also opportunistic. Emily wasn't the first woman to fall for his charisma. The knowledge stung, but it also steeled my determination. If he thought he could manipulate her and walk away unscathed, he was wrong. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Emily claimed she was meeting friends for dinner, but I knew better. I followed her car, maintaining a careful distance as she navigated the city streets. My heart raced as she parked outside a cozy wine bar, stepping out of her car in a dress I hadn't seen before. Moments later, Marcus arrived, his confident stride and casual demeanor grating on my nerves. From my vantage point across the street, I watched as they embraced, their familiarity undeniable. They shared a bottle of wine, their laughter spilling out into the quiet night. When they left the bar, they didn't part ways. Instead, they walked hand in hand to a nearby hotel. I felt a mix of devastation and grim satisfaction as I captured the moment with my phone. There was no denying it now. That weekend, I asked Emily to sit down with me. My voice was calm, measured, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I placed the photos, receipts, and screenshots on the table between us, the weight of the evidence tangible. Her face went pale, her eyes darting between the images and my expression. At first, she tried to deny it, but the sheer volume of proof left her no room to maneuver. Her defenses crumbled, and the truth spilled out. She admitted to the affair, her voice trembling as she tried to explain herself. She claimed she had felt neglected, that Marcus had filled a void she hadn't known how to articulate. Her words felt like salt in a wound, her excuses falling flat in the face of my pain. I let her speak, but I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Marcus, however, wasn't going to escape accountability so easily. Armed with the evidence, I contacted his gym's management. They were less than thrilled to learn about his extracurricular activities, especially given the potential liability it posed to their reputation. Within days, Marcus was fired, his career as a fitness trainer effectively over. Emily moved out shortly after the confrontation. The home we had shared now felt like a hollow shell, filled with memories that were impossible to reconcile with the betrayal. Our divorce was finalized quietly, both of us too drained to engage in a prolonged battle. She moved to another city, taking a job far from the life we had built together. I stayed behind, piecing my life back together one day at a time. Therapy helped me unpack the layers of betrayal, the guilt I felt for not seeing the signs sooner, and the anger I carried toward both Emily and Marcus. Mark, ever the loyal friend, reminded me that healing wasn't linear, that setbacks were part of the process. Months later, I found myself at the same wine bar where I had once witnessed Emily and Marcus together. This time, I was there with friends, laughter and light conversation replacing the heaviness I had once associated with the place. It was a reminder that life goes on, that even after the darkest storms, the sun eventually breaks through. Emily reached out once, a carefully worded email filled with apologies and reflections. She claimed she had grown, that she understood the depth of the pain she had caused. I didn't respond. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't require reconciliation. Letting go of the anger was enough. As for Marcus, I heard through the grapevine that he had relocated, his charm unable to save him from the professional fallout of his actions. It was a small comfort, knowing that his manipulations had caught up with him. Looking ahead, I felt a cautious optimism about the future. My trust had been shattered, but my resilience had been forged in the fire of betrayal. I wasn't the same person I had been before, but I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. In the days that followed, the weight of Emily's revelations pressed heavily on me. Her betrayal had been like a storm, uprooting the foundation of our marriage, but now I saw the full extent of the damage. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the manipulation and blurred lines that had led us to this breaking point. Marcus's calculated exploitation of Emily's vulnerabilities only deepened the betrayal, tainting her apologies and confessions with an undercurrent of despair. Our home, once a sanctuary, became a battlefield of emotions. Emily's attempts at reconciliation were met with my silence, her gestures of remorse unable to penetrate the armor I had built to protect myself. I spent my nights away from her, staying at Mark's place or driving aimlessly through the city, trying to make sense of everything. Emily offered to cut Marcus out of her life completely, to change gyms, and to attend counseling if it meant salvaging what we had. Her efforts felt genuine, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt in my mind. Could I trust her again? Could I forgive her, knowing how deeply she had betrayed me? And even if I could, what would remain of the love we had once shared? Mark, ever the voice of reason, reminded me that rebuilding after betrayal was possible but not guaranteed. "It's about what you can live with," he said one night as we sat on his porch. "Not what she can do to make it right." His words stayed with me, a quiet reminder that my decision had to come from within, not from her promises or efforts. In the midst of the chaos, I received a message from someone unexpected, one of Marcus's former clients. She had heard about the confrontation through mutual acquaintances and wanted to share her story. Over coffee, she revealed a pattern of behavior that mirrored Emily's experience. Marcus had a history of pushing boundaries with his clients, fostering emotional dependency under the guise of professional support. Her story lent credibility to Emily's claims of manipulation, adding a layer of complexity to my understanding of what had happened. While it didn't excuse Emily's actions, it gave me a clearer picture of the dynamics at play. Marcus's predatory behavior had been a catalyst, exploiting cracks in our marriage that neither of us had addressed. Armed with this new information, I reached out to Emily for another conversation. This time, I came not with accusations but with questions. I wanted to understand how things had spiraled out of control, what needs she had sought to fulfill, and whether there was anything left between us worth saving. Emily's responses were raw and unfiltered. She admitted that she had felt neglected, that my long hours at work had left her feeling isolated and unappreciated. She confessed to being swept up by Marcus's charm and attention, unable to see his true intentions until it was too late. Her regret was palpable, but so was her recognition of her role in the betrayal. After much reflection, I made the decision to separate. It wasn't a punishment for Emily, nor was it a declaration of failure. It was a choice to prioritize my own healing, to step back from a relationship that had become too fractured to repair in its current state. Emily agreed, her tears a mix of sorrow and acceptance. We divided our belongings and sold the house, each of us starting fresh in separate apartments. She continued therapy, both for herself and in an effort to understand the choices that had led her astray. I focused on rebuilding my life, leaning on friends and rediscovering passions I had long neglected. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that Marcus had been fired from the gym after multiple clients came forward with similar stories. It was a small victory, knowing he was facing consequences for his actions, but it didn't undo the damage he had caused. Emily and I stayed in touch sporadically, our conversations cordial but distant. She expressed gratitude for the clarity our separation had brought her, and I wished her well in her journey. For both of us, the end of our marriage marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by betrayal, but by growth and self-discovery. Looking back, I realized that the storm we had weathered had reshaped me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It had taught me the importance of communication, of addressing issues before they became insurmountable, and of recognizing the value of my own boundaries and needs. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the city lights stretching out before me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to navigate. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The aftermath of Emily's betrayal was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, but as the dust settled, I began to see the fragments of my life in a new light. It was a journey of grief and growth, marked by moments of clarity that reshaped how I viewed love, trust, and resilience. The days immediately following my decision to separate were some of the hardest. Emily's presence in my life had been so integral that the void left behind felt disorienting. I moved into a small apartment across town, leaving behind the house we had shared and the memories it contained. Packing my belongings was an exercise in emotional endurance. Each photo, each piece of furniture, each shared trinket brought with it a wave of nostalgia tinged with pain. Emily and I communicated only through our lawyers, our conversations stripped of the warmth they had once carried. The legal process was efficient but emotionally draining. Dividing our assets felt like dividing our lives, every decision underscoring the finality of what we had lost. Once the separation was finalized, I threw myself into rebuilding. Work became my refuge, offering a sense of stability amid the chaos. My evenings, once spent with Emily, were now dedicated to discovering parts of myself I had neglected. I signed up for art classes, something I'd always wanted to try but had never found the time for. I joined a local running group, the camaraderie and endorphins helping me clear my mind. Mark, ever the loyal friend, played a pivotal role in my recovery. He encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone, to embrace the discomfort of starting over. He invited me to join him on weekend hikes, his blunt but supportive advice grounding me during moments of doubt. Counseling sessions, initially painful, became a transformative experience. Through them, I learned to unravel not just the threads of Emily's betrayal, but also the ways our relationship had frayed over time. The counselor guided me to examine my own role, not in her actions, but in the dynamics of our marriage. I realized that my relentless focus on work had created a distance between us, a gap she had filled in the worst possible way. This wasn't about excusing her. It was about understanding the patterns that had led us here. For the first time, I could see our marriage for what it truly was, beautiful, but flawed in ways neither of us had acknowledged until it was too late. While I moved forward, the fallout from Marcus's actions continued to ripple through our community. The gym's management, faced with the undeniable evidence Mark and I had provided, issued a formal apology and began implementing stricter policies to prevent future misconduct. Marcus's name became a cautionary tale, his once thriving reputation reduced to whispers of scandal. Emily, too, had to face the consequences of her choices. She moved back to her hometown, taking a position at a smaller, less prestigious firm. Mutual friends told me she was focusing on rebuilding her life, much like I was. I wished her no ill will, but I also didn't feel compelled to reach out. Her journey was hers to navigate, just as mine was mine. Months after our separation, I had a chance encounter that changed my perspective yet again. While attending a community event, I met Sarah, a volunteer coordinator with a warm smile and an easy laugh. Our initial conversations were light, discussing local charities, favorite books, and the best coffee spots in town. What struck me about Sarah was her authenticity. She didn't shy away from sharing her own experiences of heartbreak, her honesty refreshing in a world that often felt guarded. Over time, our friendship deepened, and I found myself drawn to her resilience and kindness. Sarah and I took things slowly. She understood the scars I carried and never pressured me to move faster than I was ready for. Our relationship was built on open communication, a stark contrast to the secrets and lies that had marked my past. Through Sarah, I learned that trust wasn't something that could be demanded or forced. It had to be nurtured, earned through consistent actions and shared vulnerability. She showed me that healing wasn't about forgetting the past but about finding the strength to build something new. One evening, as Sarah and I sat on a quiet beach watching the waves roll in, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal I had endured, the pain of losing Emily, and the process of rebuilding my life had all shaped me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I no longer felt defined by what had happened. Instead, I saw myself as someone who had faced the storm and come out stronger, someone who had learned to find beauty in resilience. The future remained uncertain, but it no longer filled me with dread. With Sarah by my side and a renewed sense of purpose, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. My past was a part of me, but it didn't own me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The fallout of my divorce had felt like the end of everything I once knew, but now it seemed like a prelude to a transformation I hadn't anticipated. Marcus's exposure was a victory I didn't expect to need, but it became a pivotal moment in reclaiming my life and finding purpose beyond heartbreak. After Marcus's lawsuit was dismissed, the air felt lighter, though the scars of the legal battle lingered. Knowing he had been held accountable, even partially, was a salve for the wounds he'd inflicted on so many. Amanda and I stayed in touch briefly, our bond forged through a shared commitment to exposing Marcus's misdeeds. She had inspired me with her bravery and reminded me that strength could arise from vulnerability. Emily's occasional updates about her own life painted a picture of someone trying to rebuild from the wreckage. She had started counseling and joined a support group for women who had been manipulated in relationships. Our conversations were cordial but distant, a mutual understanding that while we had both grown, our paths no longer aligned. I spent the months that followed rediscovering the person I was before the chaos. I took up hobbies I had neglected, painting, hiking, and even writing about my experiences. It was cathartic, putting the journey into words and processing the lessons I had learned along the way. Mark remained a steadfast presence, encouraging me to focus on the future rather than dwelling on the past. "You've been through hell," he said one night as we shared a drink. "Now it's time to start living for yourself again." It wasn't easy, but little by little, I began to see the wisdom in his words. One evening, while attending a local art show, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Claire. She was vibrant, her laugh contagious, and her perspective refreshingly grounded. We talked for hours, our connection immediate but unhurried. Claire had her own stories of resilience, and we found common ground in our shared experiences of rebuilding after loss. Over time, our friendship deepened into something more. Claire's kindness and honesty were a stark contrast to the deception I had endured, and she reminded me that trust, while fragile, could be rebuilt with patience and care. Looking back on everything, I realized that Marcus and Emily's betrayals, though painful, had taught me invaluable lessons. I learned the importance of setting boundaries, of recognizing red flags, and of prioritizing my own well-being. I discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed and found strength in confronting truths that had once seemed insurmountable. My journey wasn't just about surviving betrayal. It was about reclaiming my life, rediscovering joy, and forging a path forward on my own terms. As I stood on my balcony one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt an unfamiliar but welcome sensation. Peace. My life was far from perfect, but it was mine, shaped by the choices I had made and the strength I had cultivated. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time I wasn't afraid. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with the lessons of my past and the hope of what could be. Months after the legal battles and emotional upheaval, my life had settled into a quiet rhythm. It was a far cry from the chaos that had defined the past year, but it was a welcome reprieve. The new apartment I had moved into, a modest but comfortable space, symbolized a fresh start, free from the shadows of betrayal and deceit. Living alone provided the space I needed to process everything. I filled my days with activities that grounded me. Long walks in the park, evenings with a local book club, and volunteering at a community center. These small acts of connection helped me piece myself back together, one fragment at a time. Emily and I rarely spoke. Our occasional texts were polite and practical, addressing unresolved logistics from our divorce. There was no animosity, but neither was there warmth. She had chosen her path and I had chosen mine. I learned through mutual acquaintances that she was focusing on therapy and rebuilding her life, much as I was. One crisp autumn morning, as I sat sipping coffee in a park, I encountered Amanda, the woman who had helped expose Marcus. She seemed lighter, her confidence restored in a way that was inspiring. We caught up, sharing how our lives had changed since Marcus's schemes had unraveled. Before we parted, Amanda handed me an envelope. "I wasn't sure whether to give you this," she said, her tone serious, "but I think you deserve to see it." Inside were documents and an old photo that left me reeling. The picture showed Emily and Marcus at a private event months before she had joined the gym. Their familiarity in the photo suggested a connection that went beyond mere acquaintanceship. The accompanying documents included emails revealing that Marcus and Emily had conspired together from the start, targeting me as part of Marcus's larger schemes. Emily's betrayal wasn't a momentary lapse. It had been calculated, her role more complicit than I could have imagined. The excuses she had offered, the remorse she had expressed, they all felt hollow now, reframed by this new context. I debated confronting Emily with the evidence but ultimately decided against it. What good would it do? The damage was already done, and dredging it up wouldn't change the past. She had made her choices and I had moved on. Instead, I reached out to Amanda to thank her. Her courage in uncovering Marcus's schemes had given me the final piece of the puzzle. Knowing the full scope of the betrayal, though painful, brought a strange sense of closure. There were no lingering questions, no unresolved doubts. With the past finally behind me, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life. I found solace in my work, taking pride in small achievements that reminded me of my capabilities. I rekindled old friendships, reconnecting with people who knew me before the storm. One evening, at a community center charity event, I met Rachel, a schoolteacher with a disarming wit and a warm smile. Our conversation was easy, unburdened by the weight of past betrayals. She didn't pry into my history, and I didn't feel the need to share it. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine spark of hope. Reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, I realized how much I had learned. Betrayal, heartbreak, and loss had tested me in ways I never thought possible, but they had also taught me resilience. I had discovered the importance of boundaries, the value of self-worth, and the courage it took to let go of what no longer served me. Emily's lies and Marcus's manipulation had turned my world upside down, but in the rubble of that life, I had found clarity and freedom. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined me. As the year drew to a close, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The pain of the past no longer weighed me down. I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, one shaped by my own choices and free from the shadows of betrayal. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought me to a place of peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly ready to move forward.